All right, there we go. So, welcome everybody to this special Carpentries community session celebrating 10 years of library carpentry. In a moment, we'll hear from James Baker, who's going to talk about the inaugural library carpentry workshop that took place in November 2015. Before I hand over to James, though, I've got a few housekeeping notes to take care of, and then you'll hear from me briefly again later on as well. So a few things to keep in mind, please, during this session. First of all, please keep your microphone muted on Zoom if you're not speaking. Use the raise hand button, or type your questions into the chat if you want to ask anything. This is a 2 hour long community session. And so we're going to take a break roughly 55 minutes in, for everybody to get a chance to stretch their legs, move around, get some water and so on. It would be really helpful if you can help us take notes from the session in the Etherpad following the link that I shared already and that I'll share again once I've finished talking. And in particular, towards the end of the session, we're going to have a kind of open reflection discussion section. And there's some prompts that are already pre-prepared in that Etherpad towards the end of the notes section for this event in that Etherpad. So if you want to, you could start adding your reflections, your responses to those prompts in advance. But yeah, it's going to be important that you're connected to the Etherpad so that you can type things in when we get to that part. And then the other important thing for me to tell you about is the Carpentries Code of Conduct. This being a Carpentries community event, like all of our other community events and library carpentry workshops and so on, falls under the Carpentries Code of Conduct. There is a link to the full text of the Code of Conduct at the top of the Etherpad, so you can head there and follow the link. That includes not only the full text of the Code of Conduct, but also details about how you can make reports to our Code of Conduct committee, how that committee will process those reports, and how the Code of Conduct is enforced and so on. For now, suffice to say that we ask you during this event to use welcoming and inclusive language, to be respectful of different viewpoints and experiences, to gracefully accept constructive criticism, focus on what's best for the community, and show courtesy and respect towards other community members. And with that, that's really all that I wanted to say in advance before I come back and talk a little bit more, to say some more nice things about library carpentry after we've heard from a few other people who've been much more involved than I have over the years, starting with James Baker from the University of Southampton, who was, I guess, the organizer and one of the instructors, the sole instructor of that first ever library carpentry workshop. He's going to tell us all a few more details about that and talk a little bit about how it's influenced the things that he's worked on in the years since as well. James, are you ready?
Yeah,
Great.
let me share.
Then thanks again for being here. Please go ahead and share your screen. And after this, we'll have some time for Q&A with James. So please, while you're listening to his talk, think about questions you might want to ask him, and we'll have some time for that afterwards as well.
Thanks, Toby. So yeah, I'm James. I'm Professor of Digital Humanities at University of Southampton, one-time British Library employee, many-time librarian and archivist and museum professional collaborator. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm in an unusual setup today. I'm in the Brotherton Library in Leeds, where I've been here running one of my digital sustainability workshops, which I was invited up here to do around something called the Digital Sustainability Card Game, which I won't go into today, but one of the many hats that I hold. Can I just start by saying how lovely it is to be in a library carpentry space? I still recommend library carpentry all the time, and it's kind of wild to me. It's been 10 years since that workshop in London. It's been an amazing achievement, and you guys do such amazing work. And I'm so proud to be a little bit of the part of what happened over the last 10 years. I kind of been asked today, as Toby said, to kind of reflect a bit on where it came from my perspective, how it kind of happened, how it's continued to resonate through my thinking. But I want to just say from the start that I I don't really want to center myself too much in this story. Library Carpentry is your story, and the start is just one little bit of that story. So all things have varying origin stories, and I would try and move my slides. There we go. For me, Library Carpentry began at 4 3-hour sessions held at City University London's Centre of Information Science across consecutive Monday evenings in November of 2015. So it was dark quite early, like it is today in the UK, and a bunch of librarians trooped all the way to London for that. Um, in my head, at least, in my thinking, Library Carpentry actually began a little bit earlier. In terms of where it came from in my head. In 2013, I went to a software carpentry workshop run by Greg, James Hetherington, and Karthik Ram. Greg might remember me sitting there being really annoyed why I couldn't work out why loops in Python worked the way they did until he told me to get in the lift and go upstairs and have some fresh air, which I later learned is key carpentry's advice when you're stuck doing something at a workshop. At the time, I was working as a digital curator at the British Library. And I kind of got chatting to a few different people, including those running the workshop, but also wider kind of software carpentry folks about why it was that people like me and my colleagues in libraries, whether they're national libraries or university libraries or other kind of library infrastructures in the UK and worldwide, kind of were showing up at library carpentry workshops where there was a kind of, sorry, software carpentry workshops, where there was kind of smattering of librarians there, kind of explaining why I thought it was happening. And what they might need to do or think about doing to kind of parse the science focused materials of software carpentry as they were to things that were more fitting for library roles. I pondered aloud, I think, at some point, if like a library version could be made a thing. And in at least for me, what was a memorable conversation in St Pancras Station with Greg, somewhere between us getting on different trains, Greg says something to the effect of, "If you make it a thing, it'll be a thing," which I guess is good advice in life. That don't worry too much about whether or not what you're doing is a real thing. Just say it is, and it kind of helps. Not quite fake it to make it, but you know what I mean. A few months after that, I think in my timeline, I applied for a Software Stability Institute fellowship, which I know other people in this call have also been involved in the Software Stability Institute, both in the UK and also now as international fellows who come in to that. And the purpose of that was to give me some money to develop library carpentry. The money SSI gives is not for your time, it's just for resources. So end up paying for the workshop materials we needed, basically. And once I got the funding, I kind of wrangled some people together to make versions/forks of software carpentry material that we thought might be kind of attuned to library people. So Dan von Strain, for example, who was then a master's student at City Library Information Sciences, is now the machine learning librarian at Hugging Face. I love that Hugging Face have a machine learning librarian. He took the Git lesson, for example, and adapted that. I did the intro on working with data, so mostly regex and the shell bit, merging some other stuff I'd worked on into kind of the shell materials that software carpentry had. And Owen Stevens, who you saw in the previous slide, he's not this one, is he? No, he's not this one. Adapted his materials from a British Library staff development program on Open Refine, a session he'd been running for a few years for them internally. He adapted that effectively for what became the basis of the Library Carpentry Open Refine lesson. And that's Owen, teaching people how to use Open Refine. It sold out almost immediately. By sold out, I mean, it wasn't charged, but we had a kind of maximum number of people we could fit in the room for fire reasons. 59 people came from 14 organisations as far away from London as Leicester, which may not sound like massively far for some of you used to traversing the US, but for someone in the UK dealing with our evening train network is relatively far. 9 people ran or helped at the sessions, including Greg on the call. And when I asked attendees at the beginning of the third week to articulate the ways in which what they'd learned thus far could be used in their daily practice, they offered a range of comments that I think weave together kind of software skills and local contexts, which I found really interesting. And I was digging these up off a combination of things I'd written and post-it notes I found the other day. And I think I typed some of it up anyway. So let me just go through some of them. Is my slide still there? Can't back to my slides. That's annoying. Oh, here we go. Right, there we go. So what did they say? They said things like, well, firstly, I got the sense that Library Carpentry was giving people a starting point. So getting to know the data is part of the challenge. We'll probably need to build on knowledge picked up here, but no, now I know where to start. That sounds like a really positive thing to me. It was giving people practical ideas. So things like people saying things like, I could possibly combine two CSV files, those books never borrowed, those book never browsed, and sort in a way that removes duplicates, possibly by book barcode number. I guess I think of shell here. Or, for example, tidying up large downloads of data from the LMS to track missing items with holds on them. So people are kind of thinking through what they could be doing with these skills in their library contexts. Um, It also seemingly started to give librarians some form of leverage, particularly thinking about how they might get leverage with their IT teams. That was a constant complaint in early library carpentry. Would need a lot more practice and building it up. But batch editing, simple algorithms for doing small but significant changes to huge data sets, but mostly talking to tech people in clearer, more useful ways. So thinking about how they can actually interact and interface with parts of their organizations. It was starting potentially to give librarians efficiency and control. So using grep to compare two large spreadsheets, one with 1,000 lines and one with 800,000 lines. Currently do it with Excel macros, but we'll be quicker with grep. So it's like that feels like one of those little wins. You kind of go, yay! People have worked out that Excel macros are horrible. Um, and things like one-to-one sessions with PGRs or PGs, signpost them to tools that would make their research easier. So kind of giving them control over their context, giving them control over their data. But this is where we get back to the IT problem. It also seemingly made a bunch of librarians who attended the first library carpentry think about what they weren't trusted to do and why their organizations were not trusting them. I need a job at a higher level to give me access to the data so I can play with it, e.g. analytics in Alma. I need admin access to my computer, exclamation mark. Might be able to sell Open Refine to colleagues, but the organization I work hates open source software. Sad face. So all sorts of things that are coming out of these interactions with librarians that's starting to get them thinking about what they're doing. So that kind of starting point to work with data, practical ideas, what they can actually do with those skills, leverage in their organizations, more control, more efficiency, and reflections on what their organization didn't want them to do. Probably things that are still coming up in library carpentry workshops today, though I hope more librarians are trusted in their roles with data. So what was this initial set of practices? So we had this library carpentry workshop in 2015. By November 2016, some key things I think had happened. We'd had a sprint, one of those Mozilla kind of sprints, which was really, really great. 4 lessons have been put together and kind of published in some form. They want to get a hacky version that wasn't quite the official Carpentries infrastructure. And 11 workshops have been run, which is not bad for, I think, a year. There was also instructor training, which some people at the call might have come to. I should say the workshops that took place in 5 countries across 4 continents. So that was a good start, I think. So yeah, the following year there was instructor training for library carpentry that took place in Portland, Oregon, which was a lot of fun. And then kind of I think, just took off from there. I at that point was no longer in a library facing role. I'd moved to a role that was more in a kind of humanities department, but collaborating with colleagues in libraries. And I figured that it would be important to let the experts take over. And a piece of advice that has rung in my ears for many, many, many years since, which one of my former heads of department, at that time head department, said to me, and it wasn't about this, but it made me think about it, was that Lucy always used to say, know when to get out of the way. And that seemed like a good time to get out of the way. So what have I done since I got out of the way? And how has that library carpentry experience kind of connected to what I do? So today I'm the chair of trustees of Programming Historian, which is a charitable business that underpins the work of Programming Historian, which some of you may be aware of, which is a multilingual open access set of journals that kind of publish article-length tutorials on computational methods in the humanities. But we also know there's kind of a huge readership among library and archives professionals. And indeed, we've just been funded by JISC in the UK to run a piece of work that will see library and archive professionals more embedded into the production of new materials for library carpentry around data-orientated approaches. Sorry, for Programming Historian around data-orientated approaches. I'm also the director now of a digital humanities group that was set up in part by my School of Humanities and our digital scholarship team in our library, and we continue to have our board represented through lots of librarians. I lead something called Digital Preservation throughout Southampton, which trains GLAM institutions and beyond on digital preservation needs. We are a paid organisation, I have to admit, but it's something that we do in our organisation. And I'm really keen to kind of embed technical education into various humanities settings. I also work on something recently started called CASDAR, which is Careers and Skills for Data-Driven Research, which is a big UK infrastructure network project where we are recognizing the importance of data stewards effectively in the research lifecycle, but actually beyond research as well, and trying to, in a way, define data stewardship as something that aligns quite closely with the kind of professional values of many people in library and archive roles. And indeed, trying to get them to apply for funding. So we have about £1 million to give away over 3 years. So we're hoping that librarians and archivists in the UK will be applying, and museum professionals will be applying for funding to do data stewardship work in their organisations. So how then has library carpentry continued to resonate in my thinking? So live code is always the one that I say in terms of pedagogical approach, I will never go back on. Things like Google Colab are great for setting up quick things, but I'll never go back on live code since library carpentry. But getting people access to what they need, so things that aren't things like Google Colab, is still a barrier, I think, and yet so important as for kind of leveraging change in context in which people work. I sense librarians have fewer issues today, but maybe you'll tell me otherwise. A good sign for me is that the kind of target for leverage has moved on in some contexts. So in the UK, for example, Research Libraries UK have moved on to trying to ensure that librarians are considered as leads on projects and leads on research where it's appropriate, rather than just supporting people within organisations. I think I took from library carpentry that building communities around educational materials is vital, and that's something Programme Historian definitely tries to do. And that finding models for investment around educational materials improves quality and improves trust. And that's something we're really focused on in Programme Historian. I think I also took away that librarians still need special things. And I want to just flag the recently LIBA published digital scholarship and topic guides, which are incredibly wonderful, I think, example of a kind of something that has moved out from using something like library carpentry as a basis, using it as a fundamental architecture to then build a series of topic guides on a series of other things that digital scholarship librarians might be working on today. And that's been an amazing effort from the LIBA team, which I think is a really important set of publications. Before I go, there's a load of people that should be thanked. I dug through old emails, GitHub histories, old repos, etc., to kind of get at this data. Thank you so much to all the people here on the slide for their early involvement in library carpentry. Some of them are not people I think still work in library stuff, but some of them, as I mentioned before, are. And there's bound to be people here I've missed. So if you're here thinking, oh, he didn't mention me, I apologize. I tried my best. You know, it's like when old email accounts disappear and you can't find old conversations. But thank you so much to all of those people for the amazing work that they did. And I'll leave it there. Thank you. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, James. That was fantastic. Yes, please. Yeah. I might ask you to put the list of people's names up again in a few minutes, but for now, while I give the folks in the audience, so to speak, a chance to think about the questions that they might like to ask you, I'll draw your attention to the extremely unscientific poll that I performed in the chat towards the back end of your talk. In response to the comment you made about hoping that librarians are more trusted to work with data than they used to be, at least within the extremely niche sample of librarians who attend a community call celebrating 10 years of library carpentry, it seems that people are indeed do feel that they're trusted to work with this, which is, I think, great news. Certainly preferable to the alternative. Thanks to everybody who responded there. What questions do folks on the call have for James about what he talked about there, those initial library carpentry workshops, programming historian, and the other things that he's been working on since, or anything else that you'd like to ask him? And a reminder, you can raise your hand in Zoom or you can type your question into the chat if you prefer. Phil, go on.
Yeah, it takes longer to find the raise hand button than it does to actually start to speak. Yes, so my question is, was there any audience that you were surprised by that took up library carpentry that wasn't in a library context? Um,
Oh, I don't know, surprised by, but I got people from the Archives and Records Association in the UK very quickly got onto me and were going like, "Why is this? Why is this only for librarians?" I said, "Well, that's not my fault." um, like sort of, I just happened to be around a bunch of people who wanted to make this happen, and I saw a bunch of librarians at a thing and thought we should do this, right? Um, and then a bunch of people came and wanted to do it. Um, I did end up volunteering on the Archives and Records Association, some Archives and Technology group or something like that in UK and Ireland, which sort of is a steering group that tries to think about this kind of skill sets archivists need. And they asked me to join as a kind of sort of academic, non-archivist kind of representative. And those conversations were interesting because I guess the things archivists wanted to do were quite different. But the thing they wanted quite quickly was, we want an open refine workshop that uses archives data. I was like, okay, fine. So at some point I did do that. And I think there's a repo for that knocking around somewhere. There's an open refine workshop with archivist aligned data. No, I remember there was conversations early on about Excel. That was one of the things. Like Jez isn't on the call, is he? But I know that Jez was really interested early on about like the extent to which sort of moving away from open source tools and actually thinking about things that librarians are likely to have, going back to the problem of access to technologies, right? I remember there was a lot of conversation early on about, should people be teaching people how to use Excel or not? And I think Jez was a big proponent that they should, because pragmatically that was something that many people actually had access to. That kind of surprised me because it's sort of, but maybe that's just because I was naive and young and thought, oh, okay, just tell people to use open source tools and they'll use it. And he was like, no, don't do that. But good
yeah.
question. Not sure. Maybe other people have better responses who were involved in the early
Well,
days.
my other thought was that in terms of National Library of Scotland using it for their workforce development planning, I think some of the audiences were across the board, but they found the library carpentry material easier to access in terms of the data sets, more relatable to people than data carpentry ones equivalent.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, I guess, because I guess, I mean, this is not a critique of software carpentry, but the core materials are quite, you are a researcher and you do science kind of focused, and not science in the German Wissenschaft sense, science in the kind of Anglophone sense. Um, so I could see why that might be, and I didn't realize that. That's really interesting.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Phil. I'll pause for a moment to see if anybody else has something they'd like to ask.
I
Tim, go
think
on.
Tim's trying to raise a physical hand. Oh, there you go. Zoom recognized it.
Yeah, I've heard an apocryphal story that you had a conversation with Greg Wilson on a train platform that led to. So I wanted to confirm that. I know you kind of touched on it, but I didn't. I wanted to, maybe you can expand on that.
I mean, that's how I remember it happened. We met at the British Library. I had to go home. You had to go somewhere else, Greg. I think that's when you were not, it was before you were briefly based in UK. And
No,
we
I
had it was
was
sort of, but it was the bit where there's all the train, the train times, and we were standing around chatting about it.
I was on my way back to Canterbury,
Oh,
and
okay.
you're right. It was after that workshop. Uh, Karthik had fallen downstairs and given himself a minor concussion just before the start of the workshop.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and yeah, the one of the things I remember is that you were wearing quite a stylish tie. Um, and the other thing I remember was that comment that if you want to do this, just, you know, do it.
Yeah, I think I felt the time I had to ask permission, and maybe I've been in contexts before where people almost half expected you would ask for sort of permission to do things when it was aligned to something they did. And I wasn't used to people being like, yeah, whatever, get on with it. Yeah, I don't, ties aren't part of my uniform anymore. It tends to be the same t-shirt, well, washed many times and then other versions of it, but broadly the same set of t-shirts. Sadly, maybe I'll go back to ties again at one point. But yes, Tim, that's more. There was a conversation in the concourse at St Pancras International Station that was quite important here.
Thanks for the question, Tim, and thanks for the memories, Greg, as well. I hope I was going to ask a question about how library carpentry moved from the kind of effort that you described to the sort of community ownership that I encountered by the time I really started to interact with library carpentry around 2020 was when I really got involved once I joined the core team. But I hope that we'll have time to dig into that a little bit before the end of the call. I do want to keep things moving to our next speakers, Anne and Phil.
Just
so
super quickly, I would say like
yeah,
Belinda was massive. So,
yeah,
and I put the names in the chat, but yeah, Tim and Belinda's names were the first thing I thought of when I thought back to this. And Belinda was massive in the early stages in creating the global sprints and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
it's a shame that Belinda can't be here. It's a time that is completely inhospitable for the folks in the community who are based in Australia and New Zealand. But I'm glad we're recording, and I'll make sure to send a link out to the other folks that you've mentioned as well. Okay, well, maybe we can return to that topic of discussion a little bit more later on. Before I hand over to Anne and Phil, thank you again, James, for coming here and for giving that talk and for having that conversation with Greg that kind of set the whole thing in motion, I suppose. I also want to say to the folks, I know a few people have been surprised to discover that we're going to be here for 2 hours and we'll have to leave halfway through. If that includes you, please do take a moment to head to line 165 of the Etherpad, and I'll share the link one more time. Where there are some discussion prompts. If you're not going to be able to stick around for the second half of this call when we'll go through those prompts, and there's things that you particularly want to say in response to any of those, then please write them down in there, and then I can read them out. And on that point, actually, while I'm remembering, David Kane has posted some messages into the chat on the Etherpad that I'd like to read out on the call as well. He says, I want to congratulate everyone and say hello to everyone at the meeting. I can't attend, but 10 years and hopefully another 10 years more. So making sure we get that on the record as well. Okay, Anne and Phil, I don't know which one of you is going to kick things off. So I'm just going to mute myself and hope that one of you does. Phil, I've seen you unmute. So I guess
but I'm hoping Anne is going to as well.
Hello, I'm here today. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. All right. Thank you so much for your patience and for that past presentation, James. I'm not able to share my screen. Is that possible? Let's do that.
It should work now. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. All right. So you all should be seeing my screen right now. So my name is Ann Myatt James, and I'm joined today by at least a couple of our co-authors. I saw there in the window Phil Reed, and I think I saw Jody Debble. And we also have additional collaborating authors that may join us here mid-presentation or or have already told us they weren't able to make it today. I'm joining today from teaching an English class. We were doing a writing project on The Tempest. I work as a guest teacher in the middle schools of Montgomery County, Maryland, and I also have appointments at a local university and do various other things on the side, most of which are not paid at this point. This was a part of a work that we put together as a part of the most recent publication of the cookbooks series that's published by ACRL, which for folks who are less familiar is the Association of College and Research Libraries here. So it's very amazing for all of us to be able to come together in celebration of 10 years of library carpentry and its contributions to responsible and reproducible research practices and professional development opportunities. And I know James talked a little bit about sort of the different users and folks who are involved in the project. And through our questions there, of course, we saw possibly different applications for the project and its lessons across not just libraries or academic libraries, but other spaces as well. And of course, it's oftentimes in the past I've made use of the lessons in the lesson program to help upskill folks in libraries. But I've also seen applications for researchers who are involved in the humanities and the digital humanities. I've made some modifications to sort of do outreach and instruction for folks in the fine arts community and various other spaces as well. Folks in other parts of the social sciences, those working with bibliometric data, there's been some application for those that I've also been able to leverage this set of curriculum for. And of course, as a part of our co-authoring of this chapter and of this particular series, today, we're going to provide a brief overview of that series in general, which has been around since it appears to be like 2009. So they've just recently celebrated 15 years as well. And there's been several chapters throughout the years that have intersected with the carpentries. So a bit of a history. The ACRL Cookbook series, of course, is a long-standing, relatively speaking, series of publications by the Association of College and Research Libraries. It's been edited by respected colleagues and contributors in the fields of education, libraries, and information sciences. And each of the 12 titles in this series are designed to engage and inspire library practitioners especially, and also their advocates in new and creative efforts to facilitate learning on a single theme of focus, with past publications focusing on a wide variety of topics like data literacy, open science, scholarly communications, outreach, and similar themes or topics of interest. The curated collections of short chapters with practical and easy to follow lessons or recipes are really designed to enable practitioners to more easily and quickly establish programs, teach concepts, conduct outreach, and use specific technologies, resources, tools, or ideas. So like the Library Carpentry lesson program, the ACRL Cookbook series just celebrated its 15th anniversary in 2024, which marked the debut of what appears to be their earliest title, which is the one here in red, the Library Instruction Cookbook, which was edited by Ryan Sitter and Doug Cook and published in 2009. So through the years, like the Library Carpentry lesson program, the most recent edition of the ACRL's cookbook series has embraced the concepts of open science and open access, and its curated collection of recipes are really designed to promote open science through advocacy and education, especially among academic practitioners, library professionals, and the like. And similar to its companion titles, the Open Science Cookbook includes a wide assortment of lesson plans and learning activities pertaining to a central theme of supporting collaborative, transparent, openly accessible, and reproducible research practices. And published in 2025, the title represents the first of the series to be included in the ACRL's online catalog that's available in a no-cost open access ebook format that enables ACRL and its membership base to more effectively engage a global audience of library professional practitioners and potential readers, especially those in academic library professions that are working in budget-limited countries and operating environments. And of course, we have a link there that we can also share with you all in the chat as well. Within the last 10 years, there's been a few recipes with very explicit mentions of the Carpentry's organization, model of instruction, and lesson program as chapters in these cookbooks. And among those, the most notable are chapters from the cookbooks of relevance to scholarly communications, data literacy, and open science emphases. Despite the reader friendliness and creative format of these chapters and books, a quick search using Google Scholar and related online search engines finds very few citations or mentions of these chapters or recipes, which suggests, of course, that the resources may remain underutilized, undercited, and or underdiscoverable by practitioners in the library profession, educators, and advocates for data and information literacy, open science, and responsible and reproducible research practices. And so, of course, publications like those included in the cookbook series enable our library and information science practitioners and scholars to make valuable and creative contributions to the profession, while simultaneously elevating and advancing the efforts of partner organizations like the Carpentries. And such contributions, of course, have the potential to extend beyond academia, especially to those of partner and organizations intersecting with community library professionals, nonprofit practitioners, library advocates and government, school media specialists and educators, and public intellectuals, especially those facilitating teaching and training activities of relevance to computer science and information and digital literacies. So as a means of advancing these efforts, members of our team have done some work initially here to disseminate the open access chapter and e-resource through some different venues. I believe Phil presented at least at one conference in Germany recently. I have some plans in place to do some additional dissemination at a couple of international conferences, and at least one additional venue was reported. So a member of our team had placed an active link for several months following the release of the resource in the signature line of their emails. So future dissemination efforts, of course, are being proposed to incorporate the resource into teaching and outreach efforts. And of course, another opportunity, as folks have access to the link, would be to perhaps share that with their community or public libraries, given depending on the area in which you are in. There could be local folks there who do have an interest in learning more about or engaging with teaching or education with respect to open science. I know here in Montgomery County, Maryland, where it is that I'm currently sitting outside of Washington, D.C., we have a very highly educated population here who does make a good bit of access to our local libraries, and a lot of folks do have an interest. We are co-located with the U.S.'s National Institutes for Health and this various branches of the federal government with research communities in them, as well as a large number of nonprofits in the area that have research sort of teams or units associated with them. A lot of those folks have don't have direct subscriptions and do have to make use of a lot of open resources and open science materials to do work and or to supplement the libraries that they do have access to. So providing links out like this one to public libraries or to community libraries can be important in helping support the work of those folks as well. So I'll pause there and see what questions folks have and see if any of my collaborators on the call have any additional thoughts that they'd like to add or share as well. So thank you all for your attention today, and I'll pause for those remarks and any questions.
Thanks, no, I don't have anything further to add really to what you said there. That was great. Thank you. I think Milani is on the call as well, just to make sure that everyone's name is said out loud of everyone who's here. I was wondering how much people have. Toby did a quick straw poll before in the chat. How many people have come across this cookbook series at all? Anywhere else? Maybe by show of thumbs up. Few. Not so many. Okay. Oh no. Okay. I just realized this is even less scientific than Toby's approach because I have no idea how many thumbs went up.
Well, thank you, Anne. Thank you, Phil. They look like a great set of resources for the kind of target audience that Library Carpentry has as well, and also the folks who teach or may want to teach library carpentry workshops too. Thank you very much for writing about library carpentry and also for taking the time to come here and talk to us about it. Jose mentions in the chat recently having learned about the cookbook as well. As a reminder of what we've got in the schedule coming up, we'll have a break in just under 10 minutes. We might start it early, but then we'll come back for the second hour to hear from the current library carpentry governance, like community members of the community governance for the lesson program. And we'll have an opportunity for more sort of open discussion and community reflections as well. I wanted to, before we take a break, take a few moments to talk a little bit from the perspective of the carpentries, the curriculum team at least, speaking on behalf of the core team, I think. To say, as I sort of implied with what I said earlier, I didn't have that much interaction with library carpentry really before I joined the carpentries core team. My involvement as a community member before I joined the core team was largely with software carpentry and data carpentry. And I think that there's a lot of the history of the lesson program that I wasn't there to witness, I suppose. But what I was really struck by and have continued to be struck by in the years since is the strong sense of collaborative community engagement around the library carpentry project. I mean, this is true for all of our lesson programs to some extent as communities based around open source projects and this kind of collaborative approach to teaching and so on, of course. But the library carpentry community in particular have been really consistent with providing that sort of community leadership, I suppose, in governance. And I wanted to particularly mention that. A few of the names that I'd like to shout out that haven't been mentioned yet, but probably will be mentioned later as well as Tim Dennis, who's been really kind of consistent throughout all of this. Liz Stokes was really heavily involved for many years until recently. Belinda as well, as mentioned. I have very fond memories of community calls with Belinda when she was still involved. And Birgit Schmidt as well, as a member of the community governance. I got a message as well from John Chodaki just before, who was hoping to be able to join the call, but isn't able to. He said to tell everybody hello from him. I'm very grateful to him as well for the community leadership and the kind of advocacy for library carpentry and for the carpentries in general that he's shown over the years. I wanted to hand over now, before we take the break. We've also got Chris Erdmann here on the call, who is another person who I will always associate very strongly with library carpentry, and we had at least some overlap there after I joined the core team, where Chris was still really heavily involved as a kind of coordinator for the projects. Chris, I don't know if do you have something like slides that you want to present from? I'd really love to give you some time to talk to folks here.
No, I don't have any slides, but I just have a lot of thanks because like really, I think James already started thanking some people, but I see some familiar names on the call, and I didn't know if I had enough time, so I'll put them into the because I had a thank you message, but I just wanted to go through some of the people that hello, I'm Chris Erdmann. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the head of Open Science at SciLife Lab. I also do work with NIH and around fair assessment and other things like that. But back in the day, I was a library carpentry director and helping move the program forward. So like kind of picking up from James and others. But like really like, like in all my posts that I made back in the day, it was all that helped me. And I think like I particularly remember moments like Tim has been mentioned. But like Tim has been a great mentor, like and I couldn't have done anything without Tim. And then Julianne Schneider, who's not here, who wrote, the grant and did a lot of support as well. I see Phil. Phil was very supportive in the governance group. Scott, I love you, man. It's great to see you. He was just a great, supporter as well, helping along the way. Cody, we kind of overlapped a little bit. I know you've done a lot of great work. Nilani, you were a great maintainer. I remember you. So I think you did a great work. And Sylvia, how could I forget you? Conrad Forstner and Sylvia and others have done great work in Germany. Like they really did great work and they still are. And the Jessies are here. And it's great to see you as well. And they were supportive. Jesse Johnson, by the way, who just threw out the heart, helped with the first Library Carpentry at Library Congress. And that was like a major event too. And so couldn't have done it without him. But like, I think Belinda's been mentioned. She was really passionate. And I think a lot of it, we have to owe a lot to Belinda as well. She was there with me helping early on. So like, I think a lot of this was Belinda too. And then, like I remember Cam McDonald, who was like a great onboarder. Julie Goldman, who's really been involved with the Northeastern libraries, getting them involved. I have a lot of other people on that list that you can, but I wanted to pull out Owen Stevens' name. Like oftentimes the maintainers don't get the credit that they deserve, and Owen is fantastic. Like the open refine lesson is really a pillar of library carpentry, and Owen did a lot of work to sort of build that up over the years, and I just appreciate all of his work. And then the same with Carmi Cronier did a lot of work as well. But I think there are names associated with library carpentry that people just don't know, right? Like, so for instance, why are the carpentry so prevalent in Australia? Well, we did a lot of work with Natasha Simons, and so Liz Stokes has also been, she works with Natasha, but Natasha Simons was really like, I remember we were there and trying to build it up over the years, along with Belinda, right? And so some names don't, get associated with library carpentry or the carpentries, and they deserve credit too. But yeah, it's also a lot of thanks. And I think I could go back to maybe one thing to mention too is Greg. I didn't have a lot of too many interactions with Greg. I know he's on the call. But I remember we hosted my first case of library carpentry was actually carpentries in astronomy, an astronomy library, and it goes back to 2013 too. So I remember we were also sort of exploring it, and Greg was very interested in what the libraries were doing with carpentries, and so I forgot Thomas, by the way. I just saw Thomas too. But I mean, all of you, it's because of you, right? And it's so good to see so many faces here that helped make library carpentry what it is. I think really you're just amazing people. So I just wanted to thank all of you, actually. That's my chance.
Thank you as well, Chris. And I'm really glad that you were here to be able to do that. Because yeah, I can't hope to have the same coverage of all of the people who've been important over the years as well. So thanks very much for coming here and for saying that. Also acknowledging the folks. I know that there are quite a lot of folks who would have liked to have been here who weren't able to join too because of the timing of the call. So special mention to them as well. We are at the time when we were scheduled to take the break. To those of you who can't stick around for the second half, thank you again very much for being here and for contributing in the notes where you've done so as well. I hope we'll see you again on another call in the future, if not before 2035, then November 2035 for a 20-year celebration of library carpentry. Thanks again to those of you who can stick around. Please do. We'll take a break now for 5 minutes. Come back at 1 minute past the hour, and I'll see you all then. Thank you again. Okay, folks, it's 1 minute past the hour, as promised. We'll start coming back from the break now. I hope you all had a chance to get up, move around, get yourself some water or something else to drink, maybe. Enjoy some of that fresh air that James was mentioning earlier. What we have next on the agenda is two items that will be led by current members of the Library Carpentry Governance Committee. We're also joined on the call by several other new members of that committee too, which is exciting. First, we're going to hear from Tim Dennis, who's going to talk a little about what's been happening more recently with the project, and also what hopes we have for what's going to come up in the near future. And then Cody is going to lead us through some more open discussion and some reflections. And well, at the moment, it looks like there's the possibility that we're going to finish a little early, but I want to give as much time to that as we need for it. So we'll see how we get on. I know, James, you mentioned that you have to leave a little bit before the end of the before the top of the hour. And to anybody else who can't stick around, then of course, thanks again for being here. And yeah, over to you then, Tim. Do you have something you want to, Tim? I should check whether Tim is there because Tim's video is not yet back on. So I may
He asked
also
me in the chat separately how long the break was, so maybe he didn't quite get that one.
Okay, no problem.
He does have some slides though. I can probably get those up.
Well, so I think maybe just for the folks who are joining the call, learning about library carpentry for the first time, or who aren't kind of intimately familiar with how it works, I might mention briefly what that governance committee does. I think this is potentially pretty helpful. Each of our lesson projects in the carpentries, library carpentry, data carpentry, and software carpentry, has like a community governance group that are responsible for guiding the overall strategy of that project, the development of the curriculum, outreach to new communities and engagement, things like that, helping the carpentries core team out with communications that are relevant to the lesson program and so on. And I've been lucky enough over the last 5 years or so to be working with Tim in particular as kind of a constant member of that community leadership from Library Carpentry. And his involvement in the project massively predates my involvement in the carpentries core team as well. And Cody's been heavily involved in actually, I'm not sure when you first started in that group, Cody, but it must be like 3 or 4 years by now at least, I would guess. And yeah, this group then, they do a fantastic job of representing the library carpentry community overall, I think, and we're very, very lucky to be able to keep supporting them in the ongoing development of that project. Tim's been doing some really exciting things recently with development of new curriculum as well, which I don't know, maybe he's going to talk about now. Tim, I see you there. Are you ready to start talking to folks about library carpentry?
Yes, I got a new cup of coffee, so I'm ready to roll.
Awesome. Exactly what you needed. Great. Over to you then.
Well,
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Let me find the right screen. Oh, there it is. Okay. It's amazing how long I've been using Zoom and still sometimes it's a mystery. So yeah, I'll give an update on the CAC, which now most recently we become a merged CAC and governance group. And I think we have some slides on that. Thank you, Cody, helped me with the slide content. I did want to briefly touch on my timeline with the library carpentry. So really it's Blenda has been mentioned multiple times, but quite honestly, Blenda called me and Julian Schneider when I was at UCSD. And shortly after she started to be really involved with library carpentry after James's initial workshop. I think she had some connection with Greg as well. And she basically said, "You're going to teach this. You're going to This is very Belinda. I mean, she's like, I said, no, Belinda, I don't really know what I'm doing. No, you're going to teach it. Y'all are going to teach it. And she basically wrangled us to teach what we thought was the first US library carpentry workshop in 2015. But then I found out there was a predecessor somewhere along the line that people taught. But it was the first in the UC community. That led to me teaching it at UC Berkeley because Scott Peterson was heavily involved with setting that up with John Chodacki. Um, I taught my first, and then along the way, John Chodacki, with help of Julian Schneider, to write a grant for my MLS to do a training in Portland in conjunction with CSV Conf um, in 2017. I became an instructor training, kind of almost like as a panic mode that, oh, we need two because Belinda can come teach it, but we need another librarian because this is going to be a librarian cohort. Um, and then I met with Greg a few times. He gave me some readings, and I kind of went through the back door to become an instructor training when you probably can't do that anymore. And I really want to thank Greg for mentoring me to become an instructor trainer. And I was an instructor trainer for a good 7 years there. Since then, and we taught a bunch. I mean, I taught with James mentioned that data science thing, and it was in Pittsburgh. We taught that Chris Erdmann organized. And so I taught at a number of places. I taught in South Africa, thanks to Belinda, and there was a nascent library carpentry group there. We taught library carpentry to librarians around the same time. So it really was a kind of a movement. It felt like a real movement, like that we were really like things we were increasing the number of people who were teaching or contributing to lessons. I've been a member of the LC governance group since the beginning. After like James, I don't remember if you were initially part of that. I think you were maybe, but then you got involved with your career and yeah, dropped off. And then, but Belinda was real active in that, and we teamed up with Chris Erdmann, who was hired by the Carpentries to help lead Library Carpentry, and he got us merged. I mean, we were the first lesson program outside of data and software carpentry, and that we kind of invented some of the machinery around that to merge and create a new lesson program in the carpentries. And that was in 2018, and Chris did most of the heavy lifting on that. Since the COVID era, I think I've been on the curriculum advisory committee more, and we had a brief split between governance and CAC. But along the way, I taught many workshops. We've had a lot of lesson sprints, contributed to lessons, and created new lessons or rewrote them. And so it's been a lot of active engagement with library carpentry and the community. And I wanted to sketch this out because there's just a lot of people like are connected to this that really are pivotal. Like, teaching with James was really important for me early on. Belinda's really advocacy and push for, expanding library carpentry globally was really important. And Chris having kind of a role to make us, kind of a lesson program that was real, had meat on it as part of the carpentry is important. So I wanted to touch on that really briefly. All right, so what have we been up to? So I think since 2022, we've been, CAC was formally established, and then we transitioned just recently to the Library Carpentry Governance Committee. That's after we're following some of the other lesson programs that, hey, it's too hard to keep two kind of subcommittees going. Let's just merge these, right? So the lesson pipeline, we have adopted a proposal, what we wrote, a policy basically that how we would adopt lessons in library carpentry. And we're the first, I think one of the first ones to say, hey, let's use this great work that Toby's been working on in the Carpentries Lab and the Carpentries Incubator. We'll use that as kind of the incubator and a possible output of this, what we consider scholarly work if you write a lesson. And that's been going on for the last few years as well. we had an engagement, like I know Phil Reed was on the Library Carpentry Curriculum Advisory Committee. He led us in like really reviewing our existing lessons because we had a bunch of lessons that were not being used. We retired through that work and analysis, and Cody was very important with that too. We retired a few lessons, and we've moved a lesson like tidy data to core curriculum. We've also adopted 6+. That might be wrong math. I don't know. Cody, you might check on. The AI for Glam lesson, which a number of people wrote, like from Smithsonian, like Hugging Face. So that was a new lesson. The Data Management Plan 101 is a new one. Computational Thinking, which is Belinda Weaver wrote and kind of said, hey, do y'all want this? That is a new lesson for us. A total rewrite. I don't know if we put here, Cody and I and Scott Peterson rewrote the Intro to Python lesson. Mainly Cody led us in that, which is being used. We also recently rewrote the R lesson. A colleague in Australia wrote that. Let me see it. Let me know. Oh, I'm sorry. 1 second. So we're really active in adopting new lessons and thinking about like, okay, what does this community need, library carpentry, as technologies evolve, as set of practices evolve, like what is important to librarianship? And we all have different perspectives, but that's kind of how we've been thinking about how we want to maintain and modernize our curriculum. I put this last thing that I'm heavily involved with, and Toby mentioned the UCLA IMLS Open Science project. We got through the door before Doge. We were briefly killed by Doge, but then we were brought back. But we had already spent the money. So, hey, we have 14 lessons that are open science oriented. Some are actively developed. Some are like that DMP one has been joined the curriculum, right, for library carpentry. There are other ones like in the docket, which we need beta piloting on, and we need some community activities so we can think about having them join the curriculum. And so that's like this is kind of the recent what we've been up to. Right? Let me see if I can move forward. All right, so the lesson adoption workflow, we want to tie it to what the Carpentries advocates, which is really solid. And I want to give props to the Toby is the curriculum director, and Aaron Becker and other folks that have designed this like life cycle, which I like just use all the time. Like this is solid. So we've adopted this explicitly. So we want to use the incubator. People incubate a lesson. We want to have some CAC or governance review. Like, hey, is this lesson meet what the curriculum needs? Do the authors want to maintain it, which is a critical thing, right? Do we want to grow community around it? And then it can join the library carpentry curriculum. We also have an optional thing, which I think initially we were going to say was required, but I think we're doing optional now. If they want to get like the full Carpentries Lab, which is a peer review process, and it leads to a DOI and some recognition, and it can lead to a Josie Journal for Open Source Education article on it, then that is an optional thing that they can do to have more rigor. And we have one lesson, the MarcEdit lesson, that is currently, Cody is leading, I think, is currently in that process. So hopefully there'll be some output soon. And the goal here is really the sustainable maintenance. For open source communities, it's really important to have active communities with different roles. And we know that that is a success criteria. So we're really concerned about, hey, you still want to maintain this lesson? If not, let's pipe it into an incubator or somewhere where people can pick it up, or they can herald it. Okay, so the policy we adopted, and this is just kind of, I've already explained it, in 2023. We assess the fit. We have a discussion with the lesson authors. We included an extended curriculum, and I think there's some things we've added here. We probably need to update the policy. Like Cody and I don't know if this is still active. We agreed to provide some of the back end on Git and GitHub, right? And we also agreed to help facilitate piloting new lessons, which we, mainly, I mean, Toby let us know that there's a prior practice where we can do an announcement and have people say, hey, let's pilot this lesson. So we want to embrace that as well. The CAC and the governance group will serve as an editorial role, and we'll find peer reviewers if we don't have the expertise in the specific content of the lesson. And then, the approved lessons are transferred into the LC org and the curriculum. Okay, and I mentioned the stages before. We have pre-alpha, alpha, beta, stable. Stable will be kind of all our core lessons are stable. We have some in beta. The AI for GLAM, I think, is in beta now. The computational thinking, I missed that before, as Belinda Weaver, I helped kind of put it into the workbench for LC, but she did the main writing of it. And I think it's a very solid lesson for people to think about why computation is important and how that might, the heuristics behind that. And the mark edit lesson is in the lab review process right now. All right, so I wanted to briefly give my own project here. It's like we do have 14 lessons that have been written in various stages of completeness, and there are different areas. And if you're interested in any of these, if piloting, if you know people that might be, you saw the data management plan. We have a lesson on reproducibility, qualitative methods. I think our author is on here, right? Nathaniel wrote a couple of lessons actually with different tools and qualitative methods. We have like a ORCID lesson. We have some cloud and container lessons. There's some on like NASA discovery systems, community of practice lessons. So basically we have 14 lessons, and not all these will end up in a curriculum. Some might be put into the incubator, and depending on the bandwidth of the lesson authors, we want them to commit ideally to maintaining it for at least a year, and then they'll be added to the curriculum or the carpentry's ecosystem. The project page is there, and if you want to pilot any of these lessons, let us know. Okay, yeah, so we did this with the DMP 101. They came, we met, and we're coordinating piloting of the lessons, and it's been adopted, and it's now in beta, so it's ready to be taught more broadly. By the numbers, we have 5 stable lessons, core lessons. We have 8 extended curriculum lessons. We do have, thanks to Nathaniel, and I think Jose is the new maintainer person, but we have an active new maintainer base. And that's great. And then we plug into anything the carpentry's org is doing, that will help us keep fresh. And thanks to Phil for the audit complete, and we retired some lessons. We've transferred everything to the workbench, I think, and thanks Topi and the carpentry's infrastructure team. And we have a global participation. We've tried to have the dual time zone type thing, so we can have people from different parts of the globe participate. All right, future. So this was a project interrupted. I'm sorry, call me if I'm going over, tell me. Toby got some money. I don't know which granting agency, was it NSF but basically to do a RDM pathway with library carpentry materials. Definitely needing, because once you grow a curriculum, you're like, how do you go through this effectively? How does this work? I mean, there's too much here. And unfortunately, Doge canceled this. It's still a need. I think it's still something we're very interested in doing. We just don't, we don't know how to, right now we need either funding or some type of intentional activity around this. Cody and I have also thought this is something we need for the rest of the curriculum, right? So I already mentioned the data management one. We have a data analysis one. We have a Python and R lesson. We have an archives oriented thing. So there's different pathways that if we can figure out the first one with a DMP, if we have some activity around that, we can hopefully replay that in a way that's effective for other pathways that will be good for libraries and library workers. And I think that's it. I just want to say that our current governance committee is these folks, and I haven't met some. I missed the last meeting, sadly. But thank you and welcome, Nikki, Ika. Cody's been on the committee for a while. Nathaniel, Anijat, I don't know if he's been able to made this call, but he's been pivotal. Le Bon Gang and Jennifer. And then, of course, Toby is our representative on the Library Carpentry Governance Group. He's part of the core team for the carpentries. And Toby has been really, like all the work Toby has done on the curriculum design, the curriculum development, lesson development stuff has all just been really solid and really helpful for us to be able to provide structure to what we're doing. So thanks to Toby. Opportunities, if you want to beta pilot, please do. If you see a community that could beta pilot any of our lessons, let us know. Contribute to lessons if you haven't. Jump in if you need help with that. You can flag an issue on the lesson. You can do a PR if you know how to do that. If you don't know where to begin, contact the LC governor's email there, or contact any Cody or me. And then you can propose a new lesson. If there's some emerging thing that's happening in library technologies and that you think needs to be addressed, that's a definite valuable thing, right? And then the carpentry Slack, please join that. And I think you need to be, I think Aaron or somebody will let you in, and then that will be, you'll be able to chat with us about what is good in the library carpentry. There's some resources. We'll post these links. And then the final thing, I added a bunch of things here. I don't know it'd be interesting, the overlap of all our things list, but there's some folks here that really, you can see there's some UCLA focus here, but I wanted to thank people that I know I taught with or have contributed to lessons that are in the library carpentry world. And I'm sure I missed some folks, but so I think that's it for me. Cody, did you want to say anything? Did you want to jump in? Because I mentioned your name a couple times.
No, I think you covered the basis.
Thank you.
Maybe if folks have questions or additions, though, I know we have quite a few
Yes.
folks on the call who are involved.
Well, Tim, thank you so much. I mentioned in the chat, but I want to mention it on the recording as well, because people watching this back won't be able to see the chat. You kind of mentioned prompting the carpentries to figure out like ways to do things, like adopting a lesson program, I guess, is the really big one. But then also you talked about the kind of lesson review for adoption as new official curriculum and so on as well. And this prompted me to make the comment that one of the things that I really noticed consistently is that whenever we're prompted by the community to figure out some system or process that we don't know how to do yet, it's like more often than not, it's library carpentry that is causing that to happen. That's been the driver for that. And I think that's a nice illustration, I guess, of that general kind of engagement that we see from the library carpentry community and the constant interest in what's coming next and the new ways to do things and so on. I think it's one of the things that makes Library Carpentry a really exciting project. And you're a big part of that, Tim. So thank you for the role that you've played over the years. I will pause for a moment to see if there are questions or anything else from the rest of the group before I'll hand over to Cody. I'm not seeing any hands go up, Cody, and I know that now we're kind of moving to more open discussion anyway. So I'll hand it over to you. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Cody. I'm a librarian at UC Berkeley. And yeah, I think I came a little later to Library Carpentry. So maybe, I think I was trained as an instructor in 2019, maybe co-taught a Library Carpentry workshop first in 2020 and started to join the CAC when Tim was mentioning like 2022 around then. So I've been engaged since then. So yeah, we're moving on to the open discussion prompts. And it seems like we have enough. This is on line 172 of the Etherpad. And maybe if Toby could drop that back in, or if someone wants to drop that into the chat. And it's great that folks who've been logging off have added some stuff. But maybe we just take a few minutes. And the first prompt is, are there people or projects from Library Carpentry that you'd like to highlight and celebrate? I know in my experience, like I've worked with a lot of people who haven't been necessarily involved in the founding or some sort of these early years. And so it's been nice to sort of call out folks who've been there. So let's just take a few minutes, maybe type things in, and then we can open it up to discussion as well if people want to share. We definitely have some time here. So I'll bring us back once I see typing slowing down. Seems like there's a little bit of typing, but does anyone want to hop on the mic and sort of record for posterity your thanks or appreciation? Yeah, Scott.
I mean, I'm just going to say this has been great, kind of thinking about all the things that have happened in the 10 years and things that I forgot, I was kind of a part of or that I did, like that were just such an amazing experience. And, Library Carpentry was kind of like us in a way, my gateway to the carpentries in general and how I've been involved in other aspects. And, the people that I started with, like Tim and Belinda, Julian, were just like such great mentors and everything that it was like, and it's great to see people like Jose, who I worked with recently here too, and James, I met you, I think, one time, and that was great. And I've worked with a lot of other people here, but it's just been, I don't know, I'm thinking about all the fantastic people I've worked with, and it's just kind of like everybody's been saying, like I've seen names I haven't heard in a long time, but I had great relationships with, and even there's people I'm thinking, I mean, are there people that have been missed because it's been so many workshops and so many years and so many, like I've helped with a couple curriculum committees over the years, and just yeah, it's been great, and I don't know, I've just been enjoying, thinking about this and going through this. So thanks for organizing this.
Nice. Thanks, Scott. And I see folks are also hopping down. So yeah, feel free to add to these other questions. Do you have a standout memory from your own participation with library carpentry? And then it would be nice at the end to sort of give some time to talk about this. Where should library carpentry be 10 years from now? What are you excited about for the future of LC? I think seeing the comments there already is really helpful for the governance group to sort of think about what people are wanting. So anyone else want to hop on the call and share? I'll add a couple things that have been really like a couple of the workshops I've been involved in for library carpentry that have been really like impactful for me are a series of online workshops actually. So, one was in the summer of 2020 that Jordan Peterson coordinated, and I think some folks who were on this call earlier were co-instructors, and of course everyone was, teaching online in the summer. But I think seeing the breadth of different folks from different institutions who came to that was really helpful, and that inspired a group of us when I was at the University of Minnesota for the last 6 years. We started doing we did a couple of them like large online library carpentry workshops that we distributed through this network through Minnesota. And so it's basically reaching Midwest librarians. And I think what was really compelling with that effort was it reached a lot of community college library workers, a lot of folks at smaller private colleges where the carpentries had never sort of necessarily reached those audiences, where there'd be a very small potential audience of people working in libraries. And in that context, it was just striking like how many metadata folks were working with the sort of skills and tools and were really excited about like Open Refine and some of these best practices and the tidy data. And so I thought that was a really cool model and a way to reach out pretty broadly for library carpentry. I think at any given institution, it's hard to bring together a bunch of people where it necessarily resonates. And so I've really liked the online possibilities for that. What else comes to mind for folks?
I can jump in and say one from a governance advisory capacity in terms of time zones. I mean, I've worked with other things that are spanning multiple time zones, but not quite this many. And I'm very grateful that I've not been at the extremities of that. So thank you, maybe to people who can't be here right now because of the extremities of the commitment and the repeated commitment of doing things at silly hours of the day. So thank you.
I think somebody is referencing there, but I've never teaching Open Refine to a bunch of librarians is the most gratifying experience that you typically have. And maybe it's propagated, but early on now, like especially metadata librarians, I literally would go, oh, get people go, oh, wow, it's like it's the most positive feedback you ever get when you get a crew that hasn't experienced it yet and they just go, wow, this is just amazing. So I've always enjoyed teaching Open Refine to librarians.
Any other standout memories or sort of folks or projects that people want to highlight? Maybe we can move on to this last. I would love to hear folks talking about this last question online. 200, where should library carpentry be 10 years from now? What are you excited about for the future of LC? This could also be criticism of where we're at now. Like, what are we doing wrong? What would you like to see happen?
James, are you keeping your lights on, motion activated?
Yes.
I will note, so in response to, I love this idea of a Python lesson that takes a more exploratory approach versus the rather technical approach. I think that's a really exciting idea. And just to put a plug in, I think we're still hoping and planning, a few of us, that we're going to build 2 more Python lessons. One would be focused on APIs and one on web scraping. We had a web scraping lesson that was really great, but was sort of falling out of, I think some of the website that we were scraping went down. And so updating that became hard to do. I think Thomas, who was here earlier, was the maintainer of that. If anyone is interested in working on new Python lessons, you can reach out to me or the LC governors. We would love to have people sort of engaged with that.
I have a web scraping. I did a lot of web scraping lesson for in the incubator. So yeah, I like to talk about it, like having one for library carpentry.
That's awesome. I'm loving seeing all of this stuff. I do think this will be like on the agenda of the inaugural governance committee meeting in 2026. These are great ideas. Anyone else want to hop on and share anything related to this? Otherwise, I think it has been a long call, so no
I
need to
could
stretch it
maybe
out.
I could maybe go on one more time and just
Yeah,
verbalize when I typed about the EDIA commitment to carpentries, which I've been reading about on LinkedIn, like the Python Foundation. So thank you, even if it does mean sacrificing funding. Well done.
Thank you, Phil.
I just want to add that, and I think carpentries itself, and I think library carpentry can be like a utility, and LIS training, right? Like in the library. I mean, I think we've made some inroads to that and we've done certain things, but I think we can do more, especially as libraries are transitioning. A lot of libraries in the States are, at least mine, and I think UCSD and some others are moving away from subject specialty models to more functional models. And that often means reskilling. And I think library carpentry would be a real, important component of that. But that's just something to think about as we pitched what library carpentry means to, the profession, so I think it's something the committee can wrestle with.
yeah, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if but it's great that how library carpentry is so ingrained in the carpentry's curriculum. And I guess what I mean by that is when I think about teaching different lessons, sometimes, I'm pulling like something from software carpentry, something from library carpentry, something for data. And knowing the different lessons, I can say like, okay, if I only have this much time, I'm going to go for the library carpentry lesson shell. Versus I have a little bit more, I'm going to go for the software carpentry lesson shell. And it's really like in my mind, it's like they're all kind of different ways of teaching some of the same things and they go over. And so I can look at all these lessons that I have, at hand to decide like which one do I want to use to fit with, the group I'm teaching and stuff like that. And it's just I mean, it's great reminiscing about how library carpentry and everything. And I mean, again, I'm just has been really great for me, but I'm also like, it's part of this other like ecosystem where it's just, in my mind, it's like they all flow and they're interchangeable and they're, wonderful. And I guess library carpentry is, got so many great lessons, software carpentry, data carpentry, and yeah. So it's great being, part of this community and a part of the library carpentry community.
Anyone else? Otherwise, Toby, do you want to wrap us up with some wise words?
Wise words. I'm not sure I've got wise words at this time in the evening, unfortunately. One more time, thank you all very, very much for being here today, especially to those of you who spoke and shared your memories and your hopes for the future and so on. But above all, thank you for the contributions that you've made to library carpentry and to the carpentries in general over the years, and for the contributions that you'll make in the future as well. To the folks who are watching this on the recording, please also check the time slider on the Etherpad so you can look through the notes that people shared as well there, because there are some things that were written on there, some really nice messages that we haven't had an opportunity to vocalize on the call as well. And yeah, I wish you all and library carpentry in general, every success for the future as well. If there's anything that you want to reach out to me to discuss about how the carpentries can keep supporting this effort in the future, then please do so. But otherwise, I'm sure I will see you all around one way or another on another community call before too long. Take care of yourselves and enjoy the rest of your day, however much or little of that is left.